Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
And welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, here for Depeche Mode, the podcast. Happy Halloween! What do you say we have a black celebration on this Halloween? That's the content this week, along with your emails as well. And first off, a quick apology and thank you to everybody who wrote in over the course of the past week. I feel a little bit foolish as the guy who does the weekly Depeche Mode podcast that I did not pick up on the fact that, as I covered on last week's episode, Martin and Dave traveling to Italy for a friend's wedding, turned out it was Anton Corbijn's wedding. I don't know how that detail slipped by me. I just didn't see it in the information when I was pulling it for the podcast last week, and I had many of you who reached out, including a friend of the show, Rob Rom, who did. Dave and Martin were at Anton Corbijn's wedding in Rome. So thank you again to everybody who reached out. I felt pretty foolish after last week's episode that was a little detail that I probably should have been fully aware of. So we do have a lot of great emails, listener feedback to get to this week. No new news to report. I know. I look for it every week, guys. Physical release of the Memento Mori tour, those 4 unreleased tracks. I have no idea what's going on. I haven't heard anything, rumor or otherwise, but, as soon as I do, there will be an emergency podcast posted soon after I find out that information. However, I do have a news item to share with you, fitting as we are celebrating Halloween at the time of the recording of this podcast. So let's go ahead and get to this week's Depeche Mode content here on Depeche Mode, the podcast, with your host, Jon Justice. Louder Sound put out an article earlier this week. We'd realized that we were not part of anything else that was going on with the music scene in England. We were doing our own thing. That is Dave Gahan on how Black Celebration changed everything for Depeche Mode. Depeche Mode's 5th studio album, and it really is crazy to think that they were only 5 albums in at this point in time, drew a line under everything that went before. Think of the Basildon electronic rock pioneers now, and everything comes to mind. Music that's dark and epic, uncompromising and euphoric all at the same time. And it has its roots in 1986 and Black Celebration. Now, before that, they were something else. Torn between their poppy beginnings and trying to broaden their sound, it was The Record where Dave Gahan, Martin Gore, Fletch, Alan Wilder became the band they wanted to be. But it wasn't without its hurdles, as Gahan told me a few years ago. Now, before I get to more of this and Dave Gahan's quote, typically on the podcast, I talk about the trifecta of albums, Music for the Masses, Violator, and Songs of Faith and Devotion. But it really is going back to Black Celebration that really set the stage. And I completely agree with this article for what the band would become. And the way the fans gravitated towards the band and finally had an image that they could latch on to. And while the promotion and artwork for Music for the Masses would certainly take a turn from its, darker iteration on Black Celebration, the band itself and their own image and style, changed and kind of stayed with the times moving forward from Black Celebration. Now, Dave recalls, by Black Celebration, we'd really realized that we were not part of anything else going on. That was going on with the so-called music scene in England. We were doing our own thing. When we first presented a couple of songs from Black Celebration to the radio plugger, Neil Ferris, their faces, it was fun to see. Excited? No, the complete opposite. Like, where's the song for the radio? We had realized that it was not our thing. And this had been discussed before, and many times. It's actually on the documentary for the remastered edition for Black Celebration. They talk about this very issue relating to the lack of accessibility to Black Celebration. There were already fans who had embraced the side of the band that wasn't fully focused on making big hits, Gahan remembered. By that time, we'd created quite a following in Europe, he said. They'd be places that we were respected for our albums. That was more important to us, making a body of work, making a piece of work. In the early couple years, we'd do anything. If someone said to us, go on a swap shop on Saturday morning, and we'd always felt uncomfortable. I always felt like a fish out of water. All the teeny bop stuff was weird, and that happened very early on because we had a couple of hit singles, Just Can't Get Enough and New Life. They were hits. Gahan said the fact that Depeche Mode were still playing stadiums at the time, they were coming off the back of a triumphant 2017 show at a London stadium. It made him appreciate their decision not to chase hit singles anymore. After all these years, we're a band that can fill the effing Olympic Stadium, and we haven't really had hit records, he said. People go, oh yeah, Just Can't Get Enough, and they can't remember anything after that. In the rest of the world, we were lucky. We were slowly forging an army of fans and following from playing live. A lot of that has come from our live performance, which is very different from the record. We were like two different bands. Now, the article wraps up, and I love the way they word this, by the way. Depeche Mode are currently on hiatus after a mammoth tour to support 2023's Memento Mori. Gahan was recently announced as one of the guest singers for the forthcoming tribute show for the late great Mark Lanigan, as we've reported on the show, taking place at London's Roundhouse in December. You know, and as I mentioned last week, I mean, one can only hope that David Martin perhaps talked about future projects while attending, it would be fitting, Anton Corbijn's wedding in Rome. Getting back to the hit single aspect of that, I tend to disagree with that. I understand what they're saying. On a first blush of listening to Black Celebration, I imagine that those who were in charge of promotion probably were shaking their heads a bit, but when you look at, the tracks that did end up making it off that album, and I'm not talking about the U.S. decision to roll with But Not Tonight, sort of the throwaway B-side to Stripped, but, A Question of Time, that song was pretty accessible. And the way that Depeche Mode made their albums, apart from the really, really monster albums like Music for the Masses, Violator, and Songs of Faith and Devotion, as you get into Ultra and down the line, they kind of kept with doing their own thing with, albums that had a couple of more accessible tracks they could use as singles, as opposed to the rest of the album, which didn't really belong on terrestrial radio, on terrestrial radio. I also think it's a big reason why so many of you have likened Memento Mori back to Black Celebration, because therein lies an album that doesn't really have a lot of accessible singles apart from, say, Ghosts Again, but it does have a lot of amazing, strong tracks. And I would put People Are Good in there as well, but we are in a much different world now relating to album promotion, how singles get airplay, and what does and doesn't end up breaking through the multitude and abundance of music and the accessibility of it in the way that we consume our music now with the streaming platforms. As I got into the car for work this morning, I still have Memento Mori in my CD player in the car. Yes, I have a CD player in my car. It's a 2014. It's not that old, but it does have a CD player. And Memento Mori has been in the car since it first came out. But I had last listened to Ghost Again, and Don't Say You Love Me came on, and boy, it's a tough pull between Ghost Again and Don't Say You Love Me as my favorite tracks on that album. I just think that song is absolutely incredible. I also found, and we'll get into this coming up with the emails you sent me this week, but I also found that while pulling Dead of Night off of Exciter, an interesting pairing, and it works really well that I didn't expect, and it just happened to be by chance as I was putting together a Halloween playlist. I grabbed Wrong off of Sounds of the Universe, and I just put those songs back to back. They work really, really well together. I was stunned at how well Dead of Night flows into Wrong. If you get a chance and just want to have some fun, put those two tracks back to back. Very, I won't say similar, because I feel like it's different when it comes to Enjoy the Silence and Ghosts Again. Those songs feel like kindred spirits. When it comes to Dead of Night and Wrong sounding well together, it more just comes down to the vibe and the instrumentation more than anything else. So, all right, let's go ahead and get to your emails. Listener feedback this week. First off, hat tip to David. He was the one that tipped me off on the Louder Sound article that I just shared with you. And he also writes, I'm not sure about the overall premise of the article. Although it's true there are no easy singles on the album, unless you count But Not Tonight. To me, Black Celebration is the third album of a conceptual quartet running from Construction Time Again and concluding with Music for the Masses. At the same time, it's certainly the quintessential Depeche Mode album. And I like the way you worded that, and I tend to agree. I think when you look at the progression from Construction Time Again, and I wouldn't have, on first blush, have included Music for the Masses, but you're absolutely correct in doing so. I think when you go Construction Time Again, Some Great Reward, Construction Time Again, Black Celebration, Some Great Reward, Music for the Masses, I'm getting those out of order. You know what I'm talking about. Those four albums really do complement each other quite nicely. From Construction Time Again, the progression to Some Great Reward, Black Celebration, and Music for the Masses. David goes on to say, in any case, always happy to have an excuse to think about my favorite album, and definitely the one that made me a lifelong fan. I hope you are well, David. I am, David. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you asking. Chris writes in and says, although I'm not a fan of Kiss, I heard an interesting podcast where Kiss fans compiled the top 10 failures of Kiss. Although I do not want to be a source of negativity for Depeche Mode, does anything immediately come to your mind? Early videos, losing Alan, particular song. For me, it was the Exciter Tour set list. Way too much new material from one of my least favorite records, and only 2 songs from the 80s catalog on the U.S. leg, Black Celebration and Never Let Me Down Again. Thanks, JJ Chris. Thank you, Chris. Listen, when I first saw this, the first thing that came to mind was Hole to Feed from Sounds in the Universe. On both fronts, the song I simply do not like, and the video I will never watch again. It just doesn't work on any level whatsoever. And it's interesting, too, because I really love Sounds of the Universe, but it's probably one of the few albums that has the biggest highs and the lowest lows. You know, Hold to Feed being one of them, but also, you know, a song like Fragile Tension. That song just comes off as such a B-side to me. It's not that I don't enjoy it, I just, as an album track. But that's the first thing that came to mind for me personally. But I'm love to hear from you, and I'm sure that some friends of the show, especially my buddy Matt, are probably already furiously typing away at what they believe are their failures. All right, let's get to your next email this week, and we hear from David. I've fallen behind on my DM podcast and have some quick takes. All right. Dave gone solo. That should have been Depeche Mode. I Need You from Hourglass is superb, and I could see it being a DM single, if not a standout album track on, say, Exciter, where the stakes are low. 21 Days from Kingdom, musically, is Sounds of the Universe in its noisiness and even the background vocals that seem tailored to Martin's voice. You also mentioned Saw Something, which to me is a flat-out minor masterpiece that I think pairs well with Gahan's beautiful Speak to Me. Oh, interesting. From Memento Mori. All right. I may take you up on that challenge. I like that idea. Hope for an active DM future. I have been assuming DM we're going to call it quits since 1991. I need to shake off this chronic pessimism after 30-plus years. Depeche Mode is a band that from day one have always produced music that is 5 to 10 years ahead of its time. It's what makes them weird, and it's what makes them wonderful. They never look backwards, and I think that's because Martin and Dave are driven by curiosity about what is possible rather than nostalgia for what has been done. Unburdened by what has been? If you think about other acts that are based in a futurist electronic sounds, Devo, OMD, Kraftwerk, New Order, even Tangerine Dream and Brian Eno, they don't really retire. They may not be massive sellers on the charts or sell out arenas like Depeche Mode, but they continue to make innovative music because, unlike conventional rock and pop acts, they are restless and they are genuinely interested in pushing the technology in new directions. That impulse alone can drive Depeche Mode to make music indefinitely and should give us all hope for future releases. Halloween Mode. Until you mentioned it, I had never really thought of DM in terms of the spooky season. For whatever reason, I always associate Depeche Mode with spring and summer. Nonetheless, you did get my brain moving in an orange and black direction. For your Halloween DM mix, Black Day comes to mind. It's not the eeriest. Is it not the eeriest of DM releases? I also find the demo versions of Jezebel, the album version, I quite enjoy, and Little 15 quite haunting. And a final suggestion, it seems out of left field, but visualize a suburban night under a sickly orange street lights, and I'm sure you, like me, recall Los Angeles from your youth. Absolutely. You're wandering the streets with your buddies, jack-o'-lantern bucket in hand, filled with Smarties, bit of honey, and the miniature Abazabas. I haven't said that in forever. Abazabas. Now imagine the night air punctuated by the creepy minimalist strains of Shouldn't Have Done That, marching feet and all. Can't you feel the temperature drop? I don't know about you, but I'd be shivering in my boxed Spider-Man costume. All the best from L.A., David. Thank you, David. That was quite the journey there, and I was more than happy to go on it. Next up, greetings from Northumberland, and the friend of the show, Steve Lank. Thanks for another great podcast episode. Thanks, Steve. I look forward to listening to it every week. I have also caught myself playing air guitar to your exit music a few times. Not sure if you have seen this before, but just before Memento Mori was released in the UK, DM played the BBC Radio 2 Piano Room with the BBC Orchestra. Yep, absolutely. Different artists have been invited to play 2 of their songs, plus a cover version. Walking in My Shoes, Ghosts Again are great, as is the song Sundown by Gordon Lightfoot from 1974. Not someone I have heard of before, to be honest. Keep up the great work. Your friend of the show, Steve Lank. Yeah, I really enjoyed the piano sessions. The Sundown cover, so that was done by multiple artists, and I think Gordon Lightfoot was the one that became the bigger hit from the original, and the version that they did was from the original, and I am quite fond of the Gordon Lightfoot version rather than the one that Dave and Martin did, but the piano sessions were absolutely spectacular. All right, Easy Tiger UK writes, talking about Halloween tracks, I believe. Maybe the tracks Wrong, Dirt, Halo, Tora would be good for a Hallows Eve playlist. I have to say that the Memento Mori album is my second favorite after Violator. It's such a good album and pure quality. Of course, we want another album in the same vein. I can't believe that costs for releases are an issue. They must have made millions from the last tour alone. Yeah, I don't buy that either when it comes to the physical release of the album being delayed. All right. Let's get to a friend of the show, Michael Tennant, writes, I have a DM Halloween mix, and Darkest Star is on there. Good call. Tweed Talk 5107 has sent in their own DM Halloween list. He says, a DM Halloween list, what could be easier? Taking into consideration darkness, also atmosphere, album by album. Here we go. All right, it's a little long, so I'm gonna roll through this, all right? So Shout, Rio Mix, Photographic, Leave in Silence, Oberkorn, Developmental Mix, More Than a Party, Pipeline, Master and Servant, Blasphemous Rumors, Shake the Disease, Edit the Shake, excellent choice, Fly on the Windscreen, Death Mix, Of course, Black Celebration. Got to include the B-sides, Black Day and Breathing in Fumes as well. Little 15 to Have and to Hold. Pimpf, Never Let Me Down Again, Aggro Mix. Halo, Waiting for the Night, Interlude 3, Clean, Crucified Sibling, Mephisto, Collide in Your Room, Rush, One Caressed, Sister of Night, good call, Painkiller, Slow Blow, Surrender, Dead of Night, absolutely, Comatose, yes, Damaged People, Darkest Star, Free, Better Days, love that track, Jezebel gets another mention on the show this week, Corrupt, absolutely, Ghost, yet again, Alone, nothing from Spirit comes to mind, and with Memento Mori, shoot, take your pick. Ghosts, again, obviously. If you like Ministry, there's no band better suited for Halloween than Skinny Puppy. Yeah, the Ministry Halloween song is definitely on my Halloween playlist. Not always, obviously, Depeche Mode, right? But Concrete Blonde and Bloodletting. That's a go-to every single year. I was actually listening to that after I listened to Don't Say You Love Me on the way into work this morning. All right, let's get to last email of the week. Jason writes in, it wasn't me that sent the email about Dave offering Ocean for the Ultra album. Yeah, I found that out later. Sorry about that. I've been busy the last few weeks, and the free time that I have, I've dedicated to binge-watching all the seasons of The Bad Batch whilst I have Disney Plus for free. Nice. I reckon that's a good reason as any for not listening to the last few weeks. So I've not written for a while. I've only now caught up on the last 4 episodes. Until recently, I've never realized that Some Great Reward cover was shot several miles from where I live, and that Brian Griffin was a local lad. I wouldn't be surprised if I was passing the factory daily to and from the office I was working at 30 years ago and never realized it. Wow, that's incredible. I really enjoyed the Gretsch interview with Martin. I think it's probably the best interview I've seen him do, as it was the most relaxed I've seen him. Usually he comes across as uncomfortable and awkward in those situations. For several years, I was wondering if he would get a signature edition guitar, although I was surprised by the color. I always imagined it would be silver and sparkly with a touch of black. The Boys in Rome, Anton's wedding, I believe, thinking about the DM 4-year cycle based off previous interviews. After the end of the tour, they would usually get together around October the following year to discuss the next album and share some demos. The year after, around March or April, they would go into the studio, start recording the album with the press conference in October later that year. But with the Walk of Fame presentation, I believe the nominee has to come up with the date that they want the presentation. My theory is they might coordinate that to meet up and discuss the new album and maybe work on fleshing out some demos at Martin's home studio. Interesting. And suggestions for a DM Halloween playlist. Not sure what the criteria for qualifying title, lyrics, aesthetics, so probably in the following order. Christmas Island, Dead of Night, Barrel of a Gun, another good call. Wrong, The Sinner in Me, yep. Shake the Disease, Scum, Hey Spirit makes an appearance. Fly on the Windscreen, Waiting for the Night, Dressed in Black, good call. Ghost, In Your Room, Question of Time, Walking in My Shoes, Soul with Me, another good call. Ghosts Again, In Chains, Black Celebration, and Pimpf. Regards, Jason. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. And thank you to everybody who wrote in this week. I hope you're having a good Halloween. I'm not really doing much of anything. It's snowing outside here, so. Listen, if you love Depeche Mode, I know you do, or you wouldn't be able to, or you wouldn't be listening to this podcast, and you also read science fiction, treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with sci-fi. Specifically, EMBARK. 7 books in all in the series, set in the future, where air and spaceflight culture has replaced car culture, inspired in part by Depeche Mode. The lead character, main character, is a massive Depeche Mode fan at a time when the music of the 80s through the 2000s is nostalgic and popular among the characters of the story. They do feature references to Depeche Mode, both direct and indirect, while telling an exciting sci-fi space opera saga. After Earth faces its end, follow pilots Taft, Katha, and their ragtag crew on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for their future among the stars. In EMBARK Book 1, Taft has found something, and humanity won't survive without it. When ship mechanic Taft Guardia agrees to help fellow starfighter pilot Keith Amaro investigate a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father, they embark on a perilous journey of discovery amid a looming planet-wide industrial catastrophe. In the middle of a global evacuation, two rival megacorporations are on the brink of interstellar war as Taft Keitha and their ragtag crew discover what may be the only hope of saving Earth's evacuees from annihilation. I hope you'll head on over to Amazon.com and check out the EMBARK series today. If you like science fiction to be epic, with cool technology, a bit of romance, and filled with action, EMBARK is perfect for you. I wrote this series because of my love of Star Wars, and I wrote it for adults, but it's great for ages 11 plus. So head on over to Amazon.com and search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK today. Available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode, and I'll be back again next week. Until then, again, I hope you had a fantastic Halloween, and wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. I'll talk to you again next week. Drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.